but I am interested in the cultural dimension as to, you know, how much would you ascribe to, clearly, Toyota? We look at Japanese culture, we see that it's different from our own. Is there any, you know, difference in cultures that makes it?
Well, look, the upside of Toyota, the upside of the Toyota as a reference model is it gives this movement, if you like, a power that no other movement has, until Toyota collapses, if they do. Okay. The downside, of course, is the Japanese context. The answer to that is, of course, that Toyota themselves didn't invent all of this either. They stole from the insights of early Henry Ford. They stole from insights that go way back to the Venetian Arsenale building ships in the 1400s. And there's a whole history of things that came together that Toyota added to. It's very significant. The whole training approach that Toyota adopted to teach Toyota production system was taken from the US military. In the US military, where the US government had commissioned a training within industry program to train the people to replace the people who went off to fight during the Second World War, mainly women, to come in and make into the armaments factories. And they developed something called training within industry, which was really an absolutely fundamentally brilliant way of training people in a scientific way, that experientially, not theoretically. That was actually the basis of Ono's training program. He added to it and modified it, but it was an American training program, right? Which John Shook discovered when he was then asked to translate the Japanese stuff back into English, and was struggling. And they finally, his sensei took him by the hand and took him to the next room and said, "Here!" And there were the original TWI stuff in English. So that's very interesting. So actually the common thread is not the cultural thread. The common thread to the Toyota approach, if you like, they themselves summarize in 2 words. Look at their adverts at the moment. They summarize it in respect for people and continuous improvement. Those are the 2 words they're talking about. The continuous improvement is taking this relentless horizontal approach. The respect for people goes right through the organization, is basically the use of the scientific method. The rigorous scientific method for planning and problem solving, which is embodied in the A3, embodying any big problem, tiny problem, on an A3 sheet, which is basically an articulation of the Plan, Do, Check, Act process. And that is the thought process that they train every single manager in when they first come into Toyota. They are given a problem and given a sensei, a teacher, to learn how to think about that problem in the right way. So it's a beginning of a dialogue that is partly to solve the problem, but partly to educate people how to think about the problem in the right way. And John Shook, who was the first Westerner hired back in Japan, has written now a book describing the use of the A3 as the essential training tool in Toyota. Whether it's on the shop floor, whether it's designing a value stream, it's the same process. So the A3 provides the context for a dialogue, back and forth, iteration, that is driven by not telling people what to do, but asking the right questions. It's the Socratic method. By asking questions to provoke the subordinate to think in a different way about what he's trying to solve. And you go through, what's the problem? What's the current state? What's the analysis of why it's broken? What are all the countermeasures? And a plan for implementing them, and then reflection afterwards. It's the PDCA method. So it's the scientific method that doctors use for analyzing a patient's medical condition that we're using to analyze process problems. So respect for people is their phrase, which means that you cannot solve a problem without some knowledge of the context of the problem on the part of the superior, and the knowledge of the detail of how that work is actually carried out by the person who is actually carrying it out. So you have to combine the 2 to get a real solution to the problem. That's respecting the people in the process. So we've got to learn not to tell people what to do. That's another kind of quite fundamental. I've separated authority and responsibility. I've changed the strategy process. I've now changed the people development process. These are some of the dimensions of this new business model that I'm talking about. If we're just giving people responsibility, that's the scattergun, will do lean everywhere. You know, use tools to eliminate waste. That's actually a diversion. We need the top down to actually focus on the few key things that will have the biggest difference to business. And that ought to have been the result. What you're saying this is a problem the business wants tackled ought to be the result of a policy deployment process that comes out of this strategy process.
Exactly. But the key thing I picked up on what you said earlier was that you actually then get an operations team telling another operations team how to do it better.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the buy-in is there, and you're just supporting that and pushing it through.
Yes. We, the experts, need to facilitate, to draw out, to connect, to build the understanding. So all of the things we learned back in 92, 93, and we started the Unipart University with John Neal at Unipart. It was all about basically breaking down the knowledge into bite-sized chunks, identifying who in the company had the knowledge, if not developing that knowledge, and then teaching them how to teach it in bite-sized chunks, and then making it available, building an intranet of projects so that anybody solving anything could find that next piece of knowledge very quickly and who's got that knowledge and who could help them. So it enhances the strength of a group just doing it out of their own resources. It gives them enormous connection to the thousands of other projects that have been done elsewhere, so that they learn what they need to know in the morning and do it in the afternoon. So you close that loop of learning and doing, because it's the doing that changes people's perception and the light bulb goes on.